Alrighty.
Here we go.
Mother of our children.
Easy, man.
Hero of life. My queen, my friend, my woman, my wife. Oh, you know.
Looking for your locks there, man.
No. I think my voice is a little too high. I ain't got the timbre of my boy Annalee. But anyway, I thought it was a good song to come into. These songs always in my head. What's not. Anyway, how we doing? Hey, everybody. How we doing? Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night, depending where you are in the world. You're here with us on the living room on the We Global platform. If you haven't already, follow us on Facebook, on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter as well. Just look for West Indians Global or We Global. You'll find us right there. Ring the bell, hit like, follow us as well. We're gonna have a good conversation this evening. Hit share, tag a friend, let them come in and have some good fun, have some good chat, good Caribbean chat with us here in the living room. As usual, it's me, Andre, and my good friends Mark and Philip. How we doing, guys?
Yeah, man.
Doing good.
Yeah. Doing good.
Doing good.
Even if a little tired.
You're tired?
You know how it is.
That's because you're following all these election, all these meetings, right? Late at night.
Why not?
Not this week though. This week I tell myself, look, no, I watch it. I listen to it while I'm doing some stuff at work, but I ain't up late watching this stuff.
I gotta do the watch back now, man. Cause
exactly.
Yeah. Gotta do the watch back.
Yeah, hey Chesterfield, see you in there as well.
Stick with the time zone you're in.
Hey, here you, man.
Stick to what?
Stick to the
You
time
gotta
zone.
live with the time zone that you're in.
No, this is true. I mean, this is true. You gotta stick to that time zone for you.
Man.
Indeed. Anyway, what y'all guys get to this week, man?
Well, first up on holiday, I think.
No. I had 2 days. I just had 2 days back in.
2 days back in. You
Easing back in.
Easing,
back
yeah.
in.
That's all.
That's smart though. 2 days after Christmas, then straight into the weekend. I think that's a smart move.
Yeah, it helps. You just turn up at work like, what's going on?
I check
You don't know anything.
Where does it go again?
Yeah, but tomorrow's Friday.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so can't do nothing.
Yeah, it don't make sense. Let me check it tomorrow. Hey, Dennis,
Exactly.
we'll look at it tomorrow. No, I with that. No problem. I see you put down some food there today, man.
Jeez.
Oh man, you see that?
Why not?
You see that?
I thought you'd be in here most lethargic.
No man,
because that looked kind of heavy.
A lot of effort in it.
You know?
I prepared my body and soul for it. I went for a run beforehand. But let me tell you about that rice, right? You see that?
Oh, Lord.
That is Sunday made. That is Sunday made. It's so easy to prepare. It's everything in one big pot, oven for hour, then uncovered, and the smell that comes out.
Robinson's pillow. That's what it is.
It's not really a pillow. It's just you start off. You put a bit of coconut oil and salt and black pepper and spice. Yeah, exactly. It's baked rice.
I was just checking.
But look, be careful that the nickname that could stick you.
I don't mind. It's a good nickname. Trust me.
So I don't misunderstand, right?
It is baked rice. That's all it is.
Baked rice. Oh, okay, just checking.
But the trick is, right, you gotta put the rice at the very bottom. Right. And I also put in lentils as well. And just stir it up with some coconut oil and some salt and black pepper and onion and garlic and ginger and so on. Just stir it up inside there. And then, so 1 cup of rice, 1 cup of water. Just put that in. Then take your chicken, pack it at the top, and then put in
Ease it in.
Yeah, ease it in. Pack it at the top. Make sure you got your rice covered and sealed in with the chicken on the top.
Jeez. Listen to
Then
my
a few
man,
herbs and onions and so on at the top. And some nice tomatoes to add a bit more.
And then with the children?
Nicole went back for more.
Oh yeah.
I was gonna say, and then with the children?
And then get baked potatoes.
I don't worry. See him in this house. Don't worry.
That's how it's work.
All good.
Gotta work with the time zone you're in.
I hear you.
Good.
I hear you. Baked rice.
Baked rice, man. Yes.
It might be a thing. You never know.
I just wanted him to explain,
Trust me, it is a thing. Give it a go. It gets rid of a lot of additional pots and so on, and it tastes good.
And Harry's there saying it. Sounds like that tastes good.
It tastes really good. It's Sunday.
I'll take your word for it. It'll look good. From the pictures I saw, and guys, you can go on our Facebook page and have a look. It'll look good. I give it that.
You gotta give him that. You gotta give him that.
It'll look good. We're your boy. It'll look good. Well, so once you get to Carbon, what about you, man?
And I just been, you know how it is, boy. Work, and more work. I didn't have the luxury of of easing back in. So I
Right.
was throwing back in from Tuesday, man. And I tell you, by 2 o'clock, Christmas was a distant memory, boy. 2 o'clock Tuesday, we ended a meltdown.
That's
And I kid you not, I was like, "Jeez, hombre." But anyway, it was a good week though. I actually felt a lot more enthusiastic looking ahead to the year. Because to be honest, normally I find this restart in January to be really, really tough. I don't know how you guys find it when you get
it
back
start
into the office.
your mindset. You gotta tell yourself it ain't really starting to the second week of January. The first week of January is just a few emails catching back.
But I don't have that
to
luxury.
say you know, it ain't really starting until the second week of January. And, you know, I had the same thing too, and I had a few medicals this week
Did
as
you?
well.
Well, tell us more.
Everything all right? What going on?
Y'all has made me so sick. You know, I don't know why you still want anything. Till y'all can do your face like, oh, tell us more.
Tell us more. It's breaking news.
As part of my insurance at work, you know, I decided I have that age now. You got to get your annuals and that kind of stuff. So lots of blood being taken and, you know, heart, ECGs or whatever you call them and that kind of thing, you know. And I wanted to do it last year, but I didn't. I had the prostate exam.
That's good.
Yes, this year already. So I start my year doing exactly what I said I was going to do. I mean, you know, we had a show with Trinidadian Dr. Sow and Barbadian as well, Dr. Lord. And from that show, I was determined that I was going to set all fear aside and go ahead and have my prostate exam. All good.
Tell us a
good,
little bit more.
that's-
Tell us a bit
that's
more,
cool.
man. How was the procedure?
Jeez, Andre. How was the procedure? The procedure was all right. Had to lie on your side and your stuff, and you just say, you know, go, you're getting
this
ready
is
there
good.
now.
Medicine.
And it was good. So I had my check, a bit uneasy. I ain't gonna tell you no lie, and even for a little while afterwards. But nonetheless, I was glad I got it done, and I think I would do that every year now, and make sure.
But you know
What?
don't pay a Chesterfield in mind, man. I actually think that's fantastic, to be honest. And I think that the fact that you're here talking, about it, it's great. It's great, you know.
Yeah. Look, and I was determined that I'd be okay to talk about it too, because I think as fellas, this is something that we don't talk about. We shy away from it. But I think that was the one thing that I got from that show that we did with Dr. Lord from Barbados and
just
Dr.
do it,
Sow
yeah.
from Trinidad.
Yeah.
Just go get it done. Put all that to the side and go ahead, get yourself checked. Because, you know, as the old saying in Barbados, effort to know is be too late. So go ahead and get yourself checked out and do that. So I did that. That was my week this week.
Phil boy, the pressure is on now.
Man, then the truth is you shouldn't put any pressure on it.
Well, it might not get pressure might not get put on, but I can tell you pressure is on now.
You should,
No,
yeah.
indeed,
I think
indeed.
we should all go out and get ourselves
Yeah, man.
properly
Indeed. So that's how I started my year.
properly probed.
That's fantastic. That's really great news, actually. So
all good.
You're blazing a trail, man.
Yeah.
You're blazing the trail.
And I'm able to sit down without a cushion right now.
Oh, gee.
Just
I'm sure it wasn't that. Sure, it was not that traumatic.
But people think so. But I just say that thing. It's not that bad. So I did that. So that was this week. But anyway, look.
Oh my days.
Bit more politics. Caribbean politics. Is there depth to it? You know, I think all three of us have spent some time this week, you know, delving into the Barbados elections. People all across the region still like, oh, Barbados holding elections? What? Kind of stuff. But we delve into it and we listen to a whole bunch of stuff. I'm sure our audience does as well when it's elections in their respective countries. And sometimes you say, but what are these people really talking about? He's still talking about the same old. Fix a pothole there, fix a road there. We got some buses here. We got this. After 55 years in Barbados' case and what's not. So we just thought we'd ask the question, is there any depth? Are there issues that we're missing? And we're going to use the Barbados election as kind of the anchor to that conversation, delving into some of the issues within Barbados as well as bringing it up to a more Caribbean level in places as well, and looking to see if some of those issues are the same across the region and whether or not elections across the region as well are still too much at an elementary level, and we need to raise the level of conversation when we think about national development in the region as well.
Yeah, and I think you know, I start by saying I just feel so tired, and I was reflecting on it yesterday. I was like, but I really was listening to this week, though. You know, I break up all of my sleep, and I don't feel as though I've really heard anything of great significance. Just felt really disappointed, to be honest. So I'm really excited to see how this is going to flow this evening.
Indeed, indeed. And as usual, we like to bring a whole bunch of people into the living room, and we're going to do that. We have one of the interesting things about this election in Barbados is that for the first time, we have two women at the helm of the two major political parties contesting.
Right.
And as a nod to that, we thought we need to have an all-female panel, and let's have some discussions around everything that's going on within the election, as well as some issues perhaps that are not making it to the fore as well. So I think this is going to be a fantastic conversation.
Okay.
So we're going to bring in you guys now. We have Marsha, who's coming in, Annalee Davis, guys, you would have seen her before, political scientist from Barbados, Kristina Hinds, and a good friend of all three of us, actually, Tricia Newton, as well, is going to join us also. So let's bring the guys in. Of course, they all come from all various walks of life, and we'll let them introduce themselves, and they'll tell you what they do, what they're up to, and what have you. So let's bring the guys in now. Well,
Fabulous.
ladies. I said guys.
Yes, twice.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Oh,
Hey, everybody. How are we doing?
not sure what happened in there.
Not sure whose microphone that was. Christina, I think we can hear you fine. I think the other guys are on mute.
Hi,
Yeah, it's Tricia.
I'm here.
Okay.
Suspicious?
Hey,
Yeah.
Christina, how you doing? Hi, Annalee. Hi, Marsha.
Hi.
Hi. Nice to be
Excellent.
here.
Tricia, how's it going? Tricia, it's your microphone that's giving a bit of problem. You might want to
Yeah,
reconnect.
yeah. All right,
You might
we'll
want
have
to
to.
reconnect with that one.
Reconnect with it and see what's going on.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. So welcome back, Annalee, and welcome to the first time to Christina and Marsha. It is great to have you, and we're looking forward to a lively conversation. As Andre said, look, let's just go around and introduce yourself so that people know who you are. Christina, I'll start with you because I know yours is a familiar voice. I thoroughly enjoy how you help me to get through the afternoons here in England when I'm listening to the radio. You know, so hey, let's introduce you to our Caribbean audience.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Christina Hines, and I am a political scientist at UWI Cave Hill. I'm a senior lecturer in political science, and I am the head of Department of Government, Sociology, Social Work, and Psychology at Cave Hill. My area is international relations. That's what I did my PhD in, which is a branch of political science, international politics. But in Barbados, we have to be specialists in what happens in the
Journalists, yes,
country,
in everything.
in the region. And since I have been in Barbados, I returned to Barbados in 2006. I think I have honed some of those skills and certainly improved my knowledge on domestic and regional politics quite a bit. I am also one of the moderators on Down to Brass Tacks. I'm a hockey player.
Easy.
National hockey player, I should say.
Easy.
Goalkeeper.
National. Oh, there we go.
Well, when
No,
we
we
were
had
playing
Trotty.
hockey,
We had
when we were
Trotty
playing
last week.
hockey, now I am, I guess, over the hill. And
Man, don't say that. Don't say that.
say that.
Don't
well,
say
we
that.
haven't had hockey in a
Richard?
couple of years. If we had it maybe like 2 years ago, I might have been able to squeeze in one more. But now I feel it's like,
You're on the
old
senior
now.
store now?
it would have to be masters. Yeah.
Masters,
So
yeah, you masters.
that's me in a nutshell. Thank you so much
Wow.
for inviting me.
No,
Not
awesome,
at all.
awesome, man.
Welcome,
And
welcome.
Marsha, as our other new person to the living room, welcome.
But I feel like it's unfair to make me go behind Christina because you can't top it. Hello to everybody. My name is Marsha Hines. I was born in Barbados, so I guess that makes me quote unquote an expert on some things Bajan or hopefully many things Bajan. I'm a postdoctoral fellow in at the University of Guelph in Canada. I'm also a woman and girls advocate, practicing advocate in the space of Barbados for the last 20 years. So I work particularly with providing services and advocacy for women affected by intimate partner violence, domestic violence, and sexual violence. I'm a mommy. Like Christina, before the lockdown, I was a bit of a gym dog, but I think now I'm just getting fat and over the hill
Oh dear.
as well.
Oh dear. Wow. Anyway, no, welcome, Marsha, and that is really fabulous to welcome you and have you join us in with your voice in this conversation.
But just remember, Marsha, per ardua ad astra.
Oh.
Just remember that.
Oh, there.
You get it in before me. You're pretending
Oh
there, man.
yes, per
You're pretending.
Adua
Per
ad
Adua ad
Astra.
Astra, Alexandra girl.
Absolutely. Yes. And that's a
Don't
part
worry.
of this political campaign we have to talk about, because you see, Alexandra has taken over from Harrison College and Queen's College
We
in terms of its offering
got
of
people
political
all over the
candidates,
place,
right?
man. All over the
All right,
place.
Interesting.
good.
There you
Nice.
go.
Okay.
I thought this I thought this might happen today, and guys in the audience, I just want you to know, as someone who's been to one of the newer secondary schools in Barbados, I got your back. Okay, we can make it too. I
We
got
ain't
you.
seen nothing about that. We didn't
Annalee
mention
Davis,
that.
welcome back to the living room.
Thank you so much, Mark.
It's
good
always
to be
a
here.
pleasure to have you, and you know, how are you doing?
I'm great. I've had a good morning. I've done my 8K walk, had my swim on
8K.
Browns Beach,
Oh,
and
Oh.
got in the hammock for a little bit. My hammock
you got me
time
jealous
today
already.
was truncated
jealous.
because I had coming on to this program, because that's
Uh-huh.
normally my Sunday afternoon activity. But
Wow.
I work as a visual artist and a cultural activist. I'm the founder of the Fresh Milk Art platform.
Mhm.
And as a visual artist, I'm really interested in ideas around post-plantation economies. I'm interested in how the plantation as an economic model has shaped Barbados and the wider Caribbean. I'm interested in issues around land.
Okay.
So I'm sitting in my studio in my library, and it's good to be with all of you, and I'm excited to hear and learn from Marsha and Kristina today.
Oh, wow. No, it's always wonderful to have people of your experience in the living room, and Annalee.
Indeed.
So look, let's delve into this question, and it's
jump
quite
straight in.
it's quite an important one. And in fact, I'm going to come back to you first, Kristina. If you could just sum up for us what you've seen so far on the campaign, as we try to examine this question about depth in our elections. And I know, look, there's a lot to say, but it will be useful to understand your perspective in terms of what you've seen and heard so far.
Thank you for that question. It's kind of difficult to say what there is of substance on the campaign trail at this point. At this stage, we had the Barbados Labour Party launch their manifesto yesterday.
Yeah,
And
saw that.
the manifesto still seems to be available to select individuals only, which I find rather disappointing, considering that the Barbados Labour Party has a Facebook page, they have Instagram, they have a website, and I went on these places and could not find it. Now, I asked a couple of people if they have a copy, people that actually went to the launch, and I was able to receive a link to a soft copy, which I also understand for people that want to have a look at this point. It is on Kev's, Kevz, Kev's Politics.
I have it
So,
as well. I got one.
Right, that's one of the places you can get it, and if you are privy to the link. As for the Democratic Labour Party, they as yet do not have a manifesto available for public consumption, nor do the other parties. So what we're left with is the voicings about policy on the political platforms, and these tend not to be quite accurate if we are being truthful about what we see on the campaign trail in general. So what I can say is that listening to that launch yesterday from the Barbados Labour Party, there is a lot of emphasis on digitalization and technology and moving Barbados in that direction. There was some emphasis on educational reform, which, if I'm being very honest, I found a little bit upsetting, because not because there are bad proposals, but because this is a government that has been in power for 3 years, and why not just get on with it? Why do we have to have this timed with an election? It really, as a parent with a child in school, it is annoying. My child is not common entrance age. He's past that, thank the Lord. But for parents who have children in class 4, I don't know how they are staying sane without knowing what exactly is happening. Over the
Uncertainty
next
is
few
maddening.
months. There was some discussion about housing, about the economy, but we have to see the details in the manifesto. And what I will say from the Democratic Labour Party side, from what I've heard on these various platforms, there is a lot of discussion about past record, which I find very unfortunate, because the past record from the last administration is nothing that I would boast about if I were a candidate. There are some economic ideas that I heard coming from David Estwick, some on tourism from Richard Seeley, although they harken back to when he was the Minister of Tourism, and some interesting ones that I've heard from some new candidates, such as Ronnie Yearwood, as well as Ryan Walters, who I believe his focus is on small businesses. But it is really difficult to get a hold of the detail at this point because a lot of this discussion is colored with the campaigning and support us. And if you vote for us, you will have more democracy. That's what the DLP is saying, and the BLP is saying. Yeah, so it's hard.
A little bit of relitigate in 2018 again. From the BLP perspective until the manifesto come out, and the DLP, in my opinion, because they never really dealt with 2018, they're now trying to go back and, I don't know if to set things straight, but to try to say, well, we weren't that bad kind of thing. It feels like, and that's all we're getting. So with you there on that one.
Yeah, I don't know if Marsha wants to talk about what she's heard about women's issues, because there were some allusions to this on Cynthia Ford when she was on various platforms, as well as Dawn Marie Armstrong, although she got a lot of criticism. But she did point out some, despite the criticism, I have to say, listen to her entire speech. And she's the one candidate that spoke about a lot of issues relating to women, and children, families, domestic violence. She and Cynthia Ford are the two that I've heard address those kind of issues, and no other candidates.
Well, let's come back into some of that, and let's bring Marsha in, just to see where you think you would sum up some of what you've heard, particularly around those issues around women and advocacy.
Thank you very much. Well, I obviously have been paying attention to the campaign, as I have been to the term of the first female prime minister in Barbados, because you hope that this is the point at which women's issues in Barbados take a central position in the politics of Barbados. And I will say, over the 3-year term, before I get into the platform specifically, I have not been impressed with the term of the first female prime minister. I don't think that across the ground in Barbados, women in Barbados have gotten a big enough return for their investment in their first female prime minister. In terms of the platforms, as Kristina said, we had a little bit of a mention of some of the issues outstanding. And more importantly than the mention was a call to action to fellow politicians from Cynthia Ford around the issues of women and girls in Barbados. So she made the point that she has been in the trenches for a long time, and she has been putting the issues of women in Barbados on the political agenda for a long time, but it cannot be her responsibility alone. And that is definitely, a resounding and fair comment for her to make. In terms of Dawn Marie's presentation, I too listened to the presentation, and I'm saddened that so much of what she said was lost to the controversy at the end of this speech. Now, one of the things that I am not is hypocritical. And I don't know if you guys know this, some of your audience will. I have had involvement in the political platform of Barbados.
I have heard this.
And while I have been in that arena, I do not claim to be a saint. And so I think that there was a way in which Dawn called on political historical tradition. We can talk about whether it worked for her or not. That's not my point. I'm not justifying what she did. I'm not saying that our political tradition can't change. But what I was very shocked about is how we were willing to sacrifice that young lady and sacrifice all that she had to say for something which might have been unfortunate, a way to construe what she said, actually, because I think it's more about how it was interpreted rather than what she said. And so we can get into the whole notion of if she should have gone there as a new politician, this, that, whatever. I accept those comments. But the way that she was savaged is what I had a difficulty with. And I thought that it robbed us as women of Barbados a critical opportunity to really say,
Yeah.
These are the issues: mental health and the support of mental health for single mothers.
The fabulous point she made. It really was.
The inclusion of support for children, from families where there is need for support in order for them to benefit from education. The financial and economic plight of single mothers in Barbados. I mean, she rattled off.
It off.
She was
she did it.
After point.
She did it really well as well.
And we opted to let go all of that, and it is sad to me.
But we have time, and I'm sure she's going to recover that message over the course of the next few days. But
I think so, because I was up pretty late listening to that because I wanted to hear everything that she was saying, and she was really impressive, I thought, in speaking. But as soon as that comment came, I went, "Oh my God!"
It gone.
Oh my God! I know what's going to happen here, because in this, as the Prime Minister called it, the silly season, we know what people are going to latch on to when you're dealing with whose party you support and all this kind of stuff. And then that became the noise. I'm pleased to see that she did apologize and she handled the apology in a very mature way. I'm hoping that there is time, as Mark said, that she will recover from that, and the message will recover more. So I really think that's the important part, actually, that the message itself recover and people pay attention to it. And before we come to Annalee or Tricia, Marsha, you mentioned that women didn't get the return. Why do you think that is?
So there are a number of ways in which, so let me give you examples. Let's not talk about theory now. Let's bring it down to what's happening in Barbados. Many of you might have seen coverage of our police statistics in yesterday's paper, and a big headline touting crime down.
Yes.
When you look at the table of statistics provided, rape in the country was actually on the increase. And so that, to me, is one of the starkest revealings of how women's issues and women's experiences in Barbados are treated.
Are deprioritized.
Crime is a male thing. So if burglary is down and if, your house is secure and this and that, we're good. Crime is down. One of the other things that we've been paying attention to, and we as Operation Safe Space, which is the non-governmental organization that I'm still involved with in Barbados, we've been paying a lot of attention to the experience of women in the judiciary when they go to report domestic violence, intimate partner violence, or sexual violence. And women in Barbados are still not being provided with the level of service that is internationally accepted as best practice. We have a systemic issue with the treatment of women and girls in the judicial space in Barbados. Of course, I could also mention, and I will also mention, the experience of girls in conflict with the law. Some people might know about the advocacy around the young lady who was naked in a holding cell at the government industrial school. So I mean, I could go on and on and on, but in the interest of time, I will use those three examples. No,
Annalee, sorry, go ahead, Mark.
No, I was going to say it's interesting, and bear in mind that we're only talking about reported crime from those headlines.
But that is very true too,
and that is only one side of the issue. But that's fine. That's fine.
And Annalee, just bring you in here in the conversation here as well. What are you seeing or not seeing so far being addressed in this election? Things that you might want to. And I know you deal with the land and the environment and what have you. Do you feel that's taking any pride of place from either party or independents in this election?
Well, I'm interested. I haven't gone through because I've only just got the manifesto this afternoon, so I haven't gone through it with a fine-tooth comb, but I'm interested to see that they're saying things like they want our voices to be heard and acted on, and we have to raise our voices and active citizenry and talking about ideas around Bajan ownership and a deeper participation in the democratic process, when I think that in some ways that hasn't actually happened in relationship to the environment. So I'm interested both in the arts and some of the issues that are coming up ecologically. I see that there hasn't been a statement in the last manifesto or this manifesto, from what I can see in my first culling, about the anything around the National Art Gallery. They're talking about transforming Queen's Park into this kind of cultural hub, and that the NCF will relocate. Under the former manifesto, they said that the NCF was going to be overhauled. I'm not sure I understand what that overhaul was. I think that people feel that Minister John King, that the arts in general didn't get the level of support. Yes, the NCF dispersed, these COVID relief grants. And I felt in a lot of ways there was a lost opportunity around the disbursement of those funds because there wasn't any reporting on where those funds went, which I think would have been an amazing opportunity to say, well, we've dispersed several $1 million and it's gone to Pineland's Creative Workshop, or this is what it's done. But they kind of sat on that information, I think in terms of, in this manifesto, they're talking about Bajan ownership and, one of my big bugs is the issue around the loss of public beach access, which in theory, we cannot be denied access onto the beach, but that access is increasingly limited.
We know how that works in practice.
And one of the things that the Prime Minister noted when they were launching the platform is that, the Hyatt Ziva will be going up and, all of these plans for more development on the coast, and we can see it. And I just have a real problem with the blue economy, which just feels like it's another kind of extractive economy. So the way in which the plantation developed, it just seems to continue in other kinds of ways. So rather than nurturing the arts or nurturing the environment, it feels like they're ideas around extractivist policies. So on the one hand, we talk about Bajan ownership, but I would be very curious to know what percentage of coastal land is foreign owned versus local owned. And I did a project years ago where I measured how many feet of beach access was available on 7 miles. From Paynes Bay to Spikes Down. It's 142 feet and 3 inches. And that was like maybe 12 years ago. And I feel that is being diminished. And then there's the issues of the coral reef and what happened, which we can probably go into later.
Let's come back to that for sure.
What happened as we were a kind of a host, offering a home for 28 cruise ships that
we paid for it.
And we paid for it, and they're not being fined.
They're not being or asked to pay or help us restore it.
No,
but we heard about the goodwill we were going to get, right?
Yes. So we've maintained loyalty to the cruise ship companies, but it feels poorish to me in that the cost is too high, because these thousands of square meters of coral reef that we have lost will not return maybe in a century.
And that ties in well with the climate change conversation, for which our current Prime Minister has been lauded for
quite vocal.
But yet we haven't heard anything about that, and we know that that's going to be an impact if you don't have a reef, if you've got an impact on rising sea level and what have you, and storms and what have you. Well, we know that's going to be an issue, as well as the beach access and what's happening and how that access to the beach is actually being taken away and being diminished, and the kind of development we're allowing on our beaches as well. So I think those are the two things there that we got to, that is in the same conversation. So I'm with you there 100% on that.
Yeah, I would like to come back to that one, but I'll come back later on. Tricia, just to bring you into the conversation and welcome. I know you had some problems getting in earlier, but you're here now. And I know that you, on this question about children in schools, you wanted to make a point about that.
Yes, I heard what Christina was saying, and my daughter is of the age to sit 11 plus this year. She will not be sitting the common entrance exam. My daughter is autistic and was doing very well in school, mind you. She was high functioning. Of course, COVID hit. That has nothing to do with the government or politics. That's just a fact of, what has happened in the world. But the response to it now is the problem that I'm having, because she goes to a private school, one of the best schools as far as I'm concerned, to deal with her situation. And they've been online. She has three children in her class. Then let me just give you the details. 3 children in the class, because this school narrows down the teacher-student ratio for obvious reasons. And they cannot go face to face, and she cannot function online at all. The common entrance itself is stressful for children in general. So we know it's going to be even more stressful now for special needs children. Okay, and she would have been praised to actually sit the common entrance exam. I believe if things did not change the way that they did, she would have been able to sit the common entrance exam. But because we continue to be in school online, even though, I mean, as I said, with her school and just having 3 children in the class, they could have gone to school easily face to face, but there are no exemptions. I guess we're looking at, but this will have to be equality, not equity, for everybody to be on the same playing field, even though there are special needs children who are not functioning in the online environment. And I myself have not been able to read through the manifesto, as I heard some of the snippets of what was released yesterday, but haven't been able to see the details. So I don't know what is in there for special needs children. I was told the common entrance exam was going to be abolished. They're going to get rid of that. I mean, that doesn't make any difference to me right now, but there is no date. Does anybody know what the date is for the common entrance exam? I haven't heard a date, and I'm a teacher in the public school. So, I mean, on the normal circumstances, this entire thing is stressful. Now that we are in the COVID environment and we're back online again for a second term, and I can tell you as a teacher, a lot of children are not functioning well in the online environment. And I honestly believe that there are solutions. Now, we were told, for example, that we would go back into a blended environment where students would be divided into groups. One set would come to school on Monday, for example, the other half would come on Tuesday. That doesn't make sense to me, I'll be honest, because you can only get through half of the curriculum doing that. And teachers have to teach the same thing twice. What I teach the group on Monday, I have to teach the group on Tuesday. Now, if we had working infrastructure in our schools, like good Wi-Fi, I could be teaching a set of students in the classroom while I'm online, and the other set online for the sake of social distancing could be receiving the same instruction, and I could get through the syllabus by the end of the term. But there's no way to get through it if I have to teach half today one thing and the other half tomorrow the same thing.
No, did you there? Yeah. Oh well, no, that's interesting, and you're right there. And again, I haven't read the full manifestos yet. I only got it this morning, as well. So I got to go through and see what's there. And then I think the DLP one's coming on Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's what they had said there as well. So we're gonna have a look at that. But I see some people in the comments mentioning the discourse and whether or not the level has returned back to what it was in the past. Kristina, are you noticing that? Have you seen that? And then what has people's reaction been to it?
I really am not certain that we've had a dramatic shift in how people speak on platforms, if that is what people mean by the discourse. There have been some shifts. So we can't act as if this election is the same as the 2008 election or even elections in the 1990s. I think that most candidates are very aware that whatever they say or do will be recorded. I think there is a lot of effort that is being placed into staging, especially by the Barbados Labour Party. I believe that their platforms have been lovely. They've been well put on. They are very well produced, managed. It seems as if their candidates are well rehearsed, as well as not all of the other speakers. When we see some of the older speakers, we get that more traditional kind of discussion. But there is an effort. But there's still so many things that are being said on these platforms, both sides, that I just feel are in such bad taste, even if they're not being said directly. Yeah. And some of them are, and I think the more experienced, Miss Motley, Cynthia Ford, some of them are doing it. Yes, they're doing it in such a clever way, right? Yeah. That if you are the person getting cursed, you know it, right? Oh, yeah. And people that know certain things know it. But if you just come and you watch a political meeting without understanding who they're taking these digs at, you don't know a lot about Barbadian politics, or you don't pay that much attention, you may not get it. And I really believe that we should be moving away from this and talking about what it is you all intend to do. Because at the end of all this fun we are having, people dancing up in front of the platform and everything, we need to get down to the nitty gritty of what is happening in our country. And to pick back up on what Tricia said, I actually turned off the what do they call it? The introduction of the manifesto, the launch.
Yeah.
When they started talking about education, because that made me so mad. And I will say why. We know that many schools in Barbados have been run down.
Yeah.
And children have not been in school. Children have not been in school in Barbados in a consistent way for about 2 years.
2 years.
Are you trying to say to me that within those 2 years, when the schools have been ghost towns, you could not go in and start doing some of these things? And you're going to wait until now it is time
to
for
go
us
back to disrupt them
cast
again.
a ballot to talk about that schools are run down and these are the things you're going to do when you get back in. But why? It's so difficult when you think about a school year to have this downtime when you can make the repairs and the renovations. And there has been downtime now for almost 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that annoyed me. And there's some other things in there about housing and so on. Some of these things annoy me, not because the policies are bad, the approaches are bad, but what is irksome about it is that so much of what we do in Barbados revolves around an election cycle.
Yes.
So things are delivered in time so that you can claim these are all of the things that we did, right? Or they are promised on the eve of an election to kind of manipulate the electorate. And I think it is really unfair to those of us out there who don't have any control over how things happen, apart from maybe calling in the calling program, talking to your MP, ranting on social media. It really is unfair. And people want to see a lot more consistent work in some of the areas that are really critical to them. It is nice to say things on the international platform and sound good, but we want that when you come home after you are a climate change advocate, you don't come and tell us about offshore drilling, right? Because two of them things ain't making sense.
You're
doing offshore drilling for oil and are concerned about climate change for small island developing states. There's some things that just don't match up. And I mean on all sides of the political aisle. And I believe that we as citizens have to start calling out these things in a way that is also non-partisan. Because when you do it BLP, DLP, nobody is listening to you.
I like that you said non-partisan, because the thing is that as soon as you start to scrutinize, as you have just done, in a very objective manner, the first thing you're being told is that you're playing politics. The assumption that you belong to you have some other political affiliation. In my opinion, for calling out things that just make sense. It's got nothing to do with party. It just so happened that you're the one who's in right now, so I'm asking you to do something about it. But and I think this is where the question comes from, is that we as a people need to demand more. But it feels that every time you try, you get smacked down into that you're playing politics kind of conversation. And then all the yard fowls come out and say, yeah, he playing politics. And I like, huh? Phil, you wanted to say something?
No, I was just saying, just following on from what Kristina was saying there is, when we talk about politics, it seems as though even the title of our talk today, of our little conversation today, we focus a lot on elections as opposed to looking at, well, what's the relationship between politicians and the people and the communities and society, and looking at the. Sorry, go on, Marsha.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's fine.
I actually wanted to agree with the point that you were making about, how issues are lost in the whole political tribal pattern that we hold for elections. And I think that civil society groups also have to be really careful with our images and our alignments in this season. Because I think there's a way in which sometimes in investing in our message and trying to do our advocacy, we end up jumping into the political fray in ways that are overall detrimental then for the people whose names we go in after election. I will tell you that one thing that has really impressed me in this election and left me with a different sense of an individual is Caswell Franklin. I am, Kristina can guide me here.
Be careful.
Kristina can guide me, but I think it would have been very easy for Caswell to jump on a political bandwagon this time around and offer himself as a candidate. And he didn't do that. He stuck to his nurses. He stuck to the principles of that fight that he was leading, and he was willing to carry it through outside of and as an adjunct to the political campaign that is currently going on. And I think there is a way in which civil society and politics will have to be separate in that way if we are going to move Barbados back to a type of politics that is more meaningful for all of us.
Annalee, you wanted to jump in as well?
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on something that Kristina began to say, which I feel is like there's this increased chasm between the local reading of the scenario and the international reading. I it feels to me like maybe COP26 was a really pivotal moment for the Prime Minister.
It was.
And I think that her placement, I think she was the fourth speaker at the opening after Sir David Attenborough, and I think that went viral. Yeah. And, you know, I met people, there were a couple of people that came out to the studio that flew into Barbados for 48 hours to attend the shift to Republican status. And their reading of her was that she is one of the world's most brilliant orators at the moment. And that they found her, the Republican event that we hosted was more exciting than attending the inauguration of Barack Obama. And our Prime Minister is being revered and adored throughout the Caribbean and now much further afield. And I think concurrently, we're also seeing, you know, a little bit of a swing in the other direction over the last number of months about, you know, where some local, and I'm seeing actually just driving around the last couple of days, the amount of these posters that are on electric poles. I don't know why we have to keep doing that actually, but you know, many of them are being torn down, and it seems as though, you know, people in Barbados are really struggling in a way that I don't think they have struggled for a very long time. People are struggling. The cost of living and the cost of food in this country is absolutely outrageous. And I'm not sure that that's really being addressed, but I find it interesting that my peers and colleagues around the region and internationally want to vote for our Prime Minister, want her to be the Prime Minister of the Caribbean, you know, all of these kind of adoring statements. And
So where do you think that got lost? Because, you know, Prime Minister Motley is very, very popular, but clearly she's lost something at home in terms of popularity. Where do you think that has come from?
I mean, I think that the shift, I mean, you know, and I'm certainly, I think Kristina and the others are much more kind of experts in these fields that I am. But as a visual artist, I would just say from what I'm seeing, it felt as though the shift to becoming a Republican status, there was a lost opportunity there in terms of educating the population. So when there was a session at Ilaro Court with some of the ministers and the Prime Minister, and somebody asked, for example, what will happen to the Privy Council? And the Attorney General, you know, he snickered because he was like, well, we've left that years ago. And and I just, you know, or people are like, so is President Mason now going to be the leader of the country? And I think there was just such a lack of understanding of what this meant. And even though the Constitution doesn't require the referendum, there was an assumption that people just understood what this meant. And I feel that she lost some ground there.
And you could have done it in a better way without a referendum as well.
You need a conversation. A proper conversation is what was required.
So you were going to go in, Marsha?
Sorry, I feel like I'm because it's hard to cue with.
Be in the living room, man. Just jump in if you need to.
Just jump in. Don't worry about it. Just jump in. We're having conversation.
I think the reason why individuals outside of Barbados get to revere our Prime Minister in a way that people inside of Barbados don't is because of something my granny used to say all the time: come see ma and come live with ma.
It's two different
things. So we get to see the back end that the world doesn't see. When you can, and I mean, this is my humble opinion, and
go ahead. You talk and talk your thought. It's just we
push my shoulders out a little bit so that I could manage, right? But when you speak fourth in line at an international prestigious conference, but a girl is found in state care in Barbados naked as she born, and you say nothing Those are the confusions that make Barbadians feel the way that they're feeling now. When a part of your imagery to the international world is as a female politician, right? And you're taking your place alongside Jacinda Ardern and that ilk of politician. But then you have a judgment in the court of your country which restricts the access of women affected by intimate partner violence to securing a protection order. These are the things that Barbadians are trying to reconcile. I think that's some of where the difficulty comes. Is the difference between come see man, come live with man.
Wow.
And Marsha, I just wanted to add to that you know, the Prime Minister has given so many press conferences, and I kept looking for the press conference on that particular issue that you just mentioned at GIS. Yes. So there was a press conference on Calypsonians singing songs that advocated violence, and then some of whom lost corporate sponsorship or felt censored within that. But there was nothing on that. And I actually don't know that anything substantial has changed for the young women who are in that environment. And this basically has felt like there is a line from there to sex work. I mean, the girls, and I'm told that the boys who are in these facilities are not getting education. So we're setting these young people out for failure. Why is this not an absolute outrage that requires the press conference to address these issues? This to me is unacceptable. And I'm a middle class person. My daughter will never end up in that environment and is the most vulnerable people that are going in there. And we've signed that convention. You are not allowed to put children in solitary confinement. Why are we doing that? It is outrageous. And that is one of the things that made me very angry. It blew up for 10 days. And what do we know about it now? Marsha, you would know all about that. I don't have the detail.
I think Tricia wanted to jump in there on that point.
Go ahead, Tricia.
Yes, I've jotted down so many things now. I'll start with the latter.
Your thought, man.
In relation to the situation at Dodds. And I will speak about the males specifically. I know we're talking about the females. The last I heard, they were only down to 2, in fact, and they're moving from the Barrows St. Lucie down back to St. Philip. I actually did some research last year while I was doing my guidance and counseling certificate. And the premise of my research, interestingly enough, was that the absence of the father in the home resulted in young males being institutionalized at that institution, the government industrial school. And at the end of my research, I actually found out that my premise was incorrect. It was the presence of the male, because these young men who were there at the time when I did the research actually lived with their father. And most of them, their father or some family, a male relative, either was in the government industrial school at some point in time, or they are incarcerated at Her Majesty's, well, I don't even know if it's being still
Dodds.
called.
Not Her Majesty's prison.
Let's call it
You know what I
Dodds.
mean? The prison at Dodds, put it like that. And I was actually taken aback. I had to go over my research and see if this was correct, because I was under the assumption that it was missing father in the home. But what is happening is that they're actually perpetuating
It's a cycle.
The cycle that they are living in, the examples that are being shown to them. And that's one point I want to make. And the other one was in relation to I am not a politician, but if I was a female politician, the first thing I would do when I was elected, because there's some things that the ordinary citizens don't have control over, I would remove taxes off of sanitary items.
Yes.
You know, you would think that is a simple thing that a female that is in power would think about. You know how many young girls are out there cutting up cloth?
Yes.
It's disgusting. To use for something that is completely natural. Because the price, and when I think Annalee spoke about the cost of living just now, the price of a simple thing, sanitary items, is so ridiculous in this country that there are people who cannot afford it. And we have to do something about the cost of living in Barbados. I am telling you, it is out of control. I was speaking to a friend of mine in Guyana, and I was saying to myself, I have to move. I asked him, how much money do you pay for land tax? And he lives on a whole acre, 25 US a year.
Wow. Serious business.
But again, that whole, I think here in the UK, that was a big issue a few years ago as well. I cannot remember what was resolved. But again, I'm bringing it back to words and speeches versus actually what is happening.
Yeah,
Right.
Because
Reality.
there's always the money in your pocket, I am for you, da 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 da, and the speeches and the oratory ability is great, but there seems to be a disconnect then in what is actually happening on the ground. Is there a feeling, and I've heard this conversation a lot of times, is there a feeling that the current PM is taking her eyes off of Barbados and looking
elsewhere.
perhaps at something loftier? Christina, I don't know, in your research, in your realm, if that's something you think. Again, we're in the living room, right? So we talk about all things. So I just saying it now.
I don't think that the Prime Minister has taken her eye off of Barbados. And I'm glad you asked this question, because in international relations, sometimes we talk about the Janus-faced leader. And there's this notion that those who lead us, whether we're talking about politicians or diplomats or those who go abroad, they speak with one face. So Janus has two faces, right? One face at the international level and another face at home, because the objectives are different. So this is not unusual altogether. And it is how we end up with situations such as in the United States of America, we had Al Gore signing on to the Kyoto Protocol in 1997, and then it can't be ratified at home because he's speaking with one face externally. But when he gets home, he has to deal with domestic politics. And U.S. politics are such that just because you hold the presidency, this does not mean that you can get everything pushed through in terms of legislation, right? So we have that all over the world. It is not uncommon if we think about how international politics operate. Leaders and those who make decisions and negotiate and sign things at the international level do things according to one logic, but then they do things differently at home. Now, the benefit we have in the Caribbean with the Westminster system adapted in, marginally, is that our governments are quite unitary. So what this means is that things that they negotiate at the international level, they can pretty much push through at home. But the implementation is what becomes the issue. So that's how you can end up with government signing on to things such as treaties and agreements that deal with children's rights. And then the implementation falls behind at home. And what we have at the international level is that enforcement is very weak. So even if you do not live up to your obligations properly domestically, there's nothing that these external institutions can do besides encourage you to continue to do better and offer you some support and give you some guidance on legislation and how to put together your institutions better and so on. And we can see this in many areas that we have international obligations. So we can see this with respect to children's rights, women's rights. We can see it with regards to the environment in so many different areas. We can see it also when we're talking about our legislative arrangements. Now we talk about even elections and best practices for elections that we agree to. And some of these things are non-binding, but we agree to them. And then we come home and we do not implement. We have agreed since 1995 that we should move towards having at least 25% of those persons who are elected to government and stand for election be women. And we have never been able to live up to these kinds of obligations. So this is something that is not unique to Barbados, but it can explain why we have this. So I don't want to say that the Prime Minister is saying one thing at the international level and another thing at home because she has taken her eye off. I think this is the nature of how international politics can operate. What we need to ask is, can we do better? Should we do better? And how can we push? And I saw one of the comments in the Facebook asked what we can do to push. And there are things that we can do. You can write to your representatives. You can write to every single MP, whether they're representing you or not. When you see an issue, you could send them emails. You could call the office. You could confuse them. I have done it. A lot of times it doesn't work. People ignore you. But sometimes it can. And one of the things I saw someone say in the chat is that the BLP manifesto has that they're going to take VAT off of sanitary products. And I would love for Marsha to come in on this, because I know that Marsha was involved in some research into this that was supposed to provide information to the Ministry of Finance as to why this was necessary. And this again annoys me that it comes out in a manifesto, because this information went to the government over a year ago. So you could have done this over a year ago to make people's lives easier. But you wait for an election. So you had to go through this year cutting up cloth and all kind of things. You wait because you time in an election, right? To do this as a present to us. Oh, we are so grateful that now you have done this. And the other thing that really annoyed me about it was that the Minister of Finance asked, Mr. Strawn, asked that women bring the information to show that this is actually a problem.
What?
Yes,
So these are the things that happen in our society.
Wait. He asked this way in a press conference?
Marsha can talk about it. But you see, the thing is, these are the things that we can actually do. Because if your government is not willing to acknowledge when you say, these are the things that we are suffering from, these are the things that are bothering us, we then have our civic responsibility to provide them with the evidence that they say they don't have, they require, to justify the things we are asking for.
So what's their job in the ministry apparatus?
Doesn't that demonstrate the disconnect that exists? I mean, before you come in, Marsha, and I'll be honest, my wife did a bit of work last October around the whole issue of period poverty in our city. And as a man, I was absolutely shocked, because I had never before realized how much of an issue this particular thing was. But you've got to do the work. So that there's such a disconnect in government is just ridiculous. Marsha?
Thanks. So on that issue, around the time the rest of the world was talking about the issue of period poverty and paying attention to it. And I was the president at the time of the National Organization of Women. And in collaboration with the Barbados Endometriosis and Polycystic Ovarian Association, which is a member of NOW, we decided that we would try to center or administration to this problem. Now, to give you the context, Jacinda Arends had just made access to sanitary items in New Zealand
free.
We did not ask for it to be free because we understand the context in which we operate in Barbados. So all we wanted was VAT removed. Because if you have an item that I need to buy as a woman and I have to pay VAT on it, but there is no correspondent item that men need to buy that they have to pay tax on, it is an unequal tax. It's a pink tax. It's a tax that I pay because I am a woman. And we were challenged by the minister to find the information and bring it to him in the context of the world having a discussion about pink tax at the height of Me Too. I could go on and on and on. So we did the study. Best and brightest. We did the study. The Barbados Endometriosis Association took the lead on the study, and we presented the information to the minister. We were supposed to get a meeting with the minister to discuss the information that we found, and up to now, we are still waiting on that meeting. But I'm actually happy to hear that it made its way into the manifesto. Although I agree with Kristina, that is nothing. That is nothing that needs to go into a manifesto in 2021 Barbados.
Especially since we could walk and chew gum.
Right.
But anyhow.
Right. But I must say this because it is important for us to understand as well how we end up with situations like this. Now, when in the 1990s, when Oenafo was the Prime Minister of Barbados and we were going through our financial crisis of that time, there was a zero-rated basket of goods that was created for Barbados, right? So remember, for a good few budgets after that, it was this whole machination of what will go in the basket and what will come out of the basket. We all remember that, right?
Remember that,
Now, the reason why we ended up with sanitary napkins not in that basket to begin with is because we do not have gender mainstreaming in Barbados. We do not do gender policy as a normal course of our government. Okay? So because we do not consider the needs of the women in our society, and mind you, as at the last census in 2010, there were 144,000 women living in Barbados compared to 138,000 men. So when we do not do gendered analysis in our governance in Barbados, we leave out the needs of more than half of our population. Okay? So that is how we get to it. And it is important to understand that, because that is not a part only of an election cycle. That is a part of how we govern across the board. The other thing that I will mention in that vein, when we had the two storms in Barbados there the other day, the freak storm and then Elsa, I think it was. I wanted to do an analysis. I sit on the UNDP Small Grants Fund as the gender focal point for Barbados. I wanted to do an analysis of how climate change stood to affect Barbadian women. We know that several Barbadian women are single house owning individuals. And so I wanted to, in that context, understand how much of this damage had affected female households that were owned by women. I could not get the data because the data was not disaggregated according to gender. Now, again, we have made several commitments to the UN, to all kinds of multilaterals, that we will have gender disaggregated data. All right? So when we go to political meetings and we wear shirts and we jump up and we palance, that is not changing the reality of how we govern ourselves inside of these cycles. Now, the final thing that I wanted to say, I mean, I'm sorry. I'm always fascinated when Kristina speaks, and she knows that, right? And so I've been thinking about what she was saying in terms of the division between international politics and domestic politics and how that plays out. And I'm thinking of my own work and research around gender and leadership and how female leadership looks different. And I'm wondering if that dichotomy between international politics and domestic politics and how we bridge the gap, I am wondering if female leadership, if that is one of the ways that female leadership is expected to be different.
Interesting.
So I think right now what we have in Barbados is women in power. We have women in power. We don't have women in leadership, because when we have women in leadership, it will make a difference to the lives of the average woman in Barbados. I think it will be the point at which we think of a politics where there are not those divisions, right? And so I was wondering if Kristina thinks that one of the ways that female leadership can be different or would be different is in closing that dichotomy between the international and the domestic, and what happens in the two spheres.
And before Kristina comes back on that, I just wonder if you had any comment on this question, Marsha. Because I think this is touch a nerve with people in the
charity that supports
is there a charity that supports
items?
Right. So I know that the same Barbados Endometriosis and Polycystic Ovarian Association did a lot of work in the 2 years that I was the president of now, with making sure that individuals got access to sanitary items. The National Organization of Women did do some distribution as well, and we made sure that during COVID, when we were packing hampers for families, that one of the staple items in those hampers was sanitary napkins, because we were hearing the cries of women who could not provide for themselves in terms of that monthly need. And so we were doing...
If I could though, Marsha.
Sorry, go ahead.
There's also the Lady Box Project, and they do that as well. They also provide things like diapers and some of these other items that people may need. And I know that during the pandemic, Always, which is not a charity, but the company that is, I believe, the most popular in Barbados, they have some bins at certain pharmacies where they're at the front of some of these pharmacies. And what they ask is that people, when they go and buy their own sanitary napkins or whatever that they
donate.
buy additional and drop in the bin.
And drop in the bin.
And
Alright,
then always, I guess, in connection with some of the charities in Barbados or otherwise, provides these items to them. So there are some other entities as well.
Do they then match the donations as well?
I am not sure exactly how it works, but
Otherwise,
what,
it's just a profit grab. It's
well,
almost
well,
me.
what I will
Well, it's
say
a good
is
initiative.
what I would say though is based on some of what I have seen and read so far, that they have been quite good in keeping their prices stable in Barbados and across the region in light of these costs, and also in supporting organizations such as the same Barbados endometriosis and I'm not sure the full name, polycystic ovarian. I think that's the whole name. That association, and they have provided this support to different organizations. I can't say if they should do more or not because I have not done research on the institution, but from what I have seen, at least I know they do make an effort.
Okay.
But the fact that so many organizations are doing something about this, addressing this issue, tells you that it is an issue.
It's an issue.
Because
I hope
my
politicians could not
church,
know that by now.
you know, even my church, when the pandemic hit, we packed for I am the youth minister. I've been doing youth ministry for 13 years, and the first thing I thought about was these girls are at home, and we started packing packages for them and made sure to include those sanitary items because we knew that that was going to be an issue at this point in time.
Fantastic.
And there are a lot of girls, as Tricia is saying, there are a lot of girls who are dependent on schools across the island to provide those items when school is in session.
Being in school,
And let me make it clear that teachers buy those items out of their money. Okay, and you keep them in your classroom, whatever, and you would know the people, you know, who will cycle through and avail themselves of that. So one of the things that has also been problematic in this campaign is how we have treated to providing the social service that is school for a lot of children in Barbados. So school is not only about education
Absolutely.
for
It's about a meal.
of children in Barbados.
Yeah.
It is the meal.
Yeah.
It is a counselor to talk to, who is the teacher. It is a safe space where there's no fighting, there's no cursing, there's no abuse, and we have not done enough to understand and to factor in that it's not just school in terms of the academics that was closed, but it's also a safe space for a lot of Barbadian children that was closed.
Yeah, and I would say it's also a place where children can be heard. I know that our schools are not perfect. My child has only gone to public school, primary and secondary, and I know from having stepchildren in private school system, it is quite different in terms of the approach that the teachers take to listening to children, right? And I think that has a lot to do with classroom management, which is something different. But it is a place where at least they can be listened to. They can, if they're asked a question, they can answer. They have friends there that they can talk to, and their friends listen to them. And, you know, there's some really important things that happen in schools that I am concerned about children missing out on, especially children who don't have good internet access for classes. That means devices. They probably don't have good internet access to be talking to their friends online either.
True.
You know, and sometimes the friends really can help children through things they may be struggling with at home, even though they don't even know that they're helping their friend through this just by being their friend, you know? So there are a lot of things that in terms of, and this is a very strange time because none of us asked for this pandemic. Nobody planned for it. And I would be very fair to the government and say that they have done some things that are quite good. There are other things that I don't agree with. And I agree with Marsha that the gender lens has not been in their glasses when they're making certain decisions, such as related to the lockdown. I was really concerned that only at what I would call the last minute were some kinds of provisions made to at least have a hotline or something to address domestic violence and child abuse when people are forced to be at home, right? And also to address things like people breaking curfew. People may be breaking curfew because they are not safe at home. So even if it is 12:30, they are getting out of that place, right? Because if they stay in there and abide by the curfew, you might end up with a broken bone or something. So there are a lot of these things that I think we don't put in the gender lens and the glasses. And I think it's really unfortunate, because if we go back to elections and we look at the composition of our electorate, as Marsha mentioned, our population comprises more women, slightly more women than men. So does the electorate. But what I will say to you in addition to that is that women turn out to vote in larger quantities and proportions than men. And I'm not just talking about the absolute number, I'm talking about the percentage of registered voters. So in the 2018 election, that's why I went off the camera a bit. I went to get my book. I wrote.
No worries, bring the stats, man. I like it.
In the 2018 election, 64% of women who were registered voters went and voted, as opposed to 55% of men who were registered, right? And we also see this in the 2013 election, which had a higher voter turnout, and in which we had 70% of women who were registered to vote voted, as opposed to 58% of men. So the fact that some of these issues are not addressed, it's not just that this is a feminist concern. That's what some people say, right? Y'all are feminists. So if we take that out of it, what we can say is that the majority of the persons, a significant proportion of the persons who vote MPs into office and vote governments into office are women. And therefore, their concerns need to be taken very seriously.
But Christina, I this is good and true and right. But women are also some of the most partisan as well. They vote for who they vote for. They like who they like. I mean, when I talk to my women in my family, they would tell you straight that either B or D, and nothing can change their mind. How can we get these things be to the forefront and actually be a deciding factor for people, for the general populace, for women as well?
Well, I think we can talk about supply and demand. So if we are not demanding it, so if those of us who go out to vote, whether women or men, are not demanding it, it will not be supplied. So some of us, those who demand these things, have to do it quite vocally in terms of candidate recruitment, as well as preparation for candidacy and for elections. I think inside of the political parties, they need to become a lot more attuned to these things. And it is not just for the benefit of women, but it does benefit our entire society. Agreed. And that takes me to Marsha's point, right? Well, increasing the number, having more women in politics or having women in leadership create something that is different? No, not necessarily. Because the reason we would want to have more women is that you have the chance. So if we're talking about statistically, you have a better chance of having women who are attuned to these kinds of issues if you have more of them. But if you have three, you might have three women that think in a very kind of traditional, so-called traditional way, that may even subscribe to a lot of patriarchal views and are not helpful. So we're looking for a variety of women, not just when we want to increase the numbers. We're not just increasing for the sake of it. We want to have different types of candidates across the women as well as across the men. You want to have different types of candidates as men as well. You don't want everybody to be a lawyer. You don't want everybody to go to the same school. You don't want that, because then you don't want them to all have similar life experiences, because then they're not necessarily able to empathize in the way that we would like and bring alternative viewpoints to government.
But that's why it's been good to see some more independent candidates coming out at the moment. You know, I mean, it's unlikely. I don't know how many of them will win a seat, but at least people are throwing their hat into the ring. And, you know, there's another voice, I guess, that's being heard. But with such a short lead time up to the elections, they're in a really difficult situation to be able to get their voice heard.
I mean, they had 10 years, they won't get in.
Well, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Yeah. I mean, it's the one thing about saying that they, you know, in their manifesto, they want to hear your voices, but they're also voices that even if they're shouting, they're not being listened to. You know, I remember in 2019 when this concerned citizen group of Barbados developed their online petition to keep the sea window at Accra open. And they submitted a 250-page document with over, I think it was more than 5,000 signatures that went to town and country planning. And I don't think we've heard anything about that. So, I think there are cases where people are trying to raise these issues, but they're actually not being heard.
Can I make a point there actually? Because if I remember correctly, there was something in Barbados called constituency councils not so long ago, and I thought it might have been an opportunity for the voice of people in the community to be heard, and I think they probably got abandoned. And we often talk between ourselves at We Global about the fact that every 5 years we seem to start over. So we might have been listening at that lower level 10 years ago, abandon it, come 5 years on down the line, let's do that again. And we just constantly seem to be going through this motion of restarting and restarting over and over. If you're going to listen to people, you have to give things time to mature. And I actually thought the whole constituency council idea would have been a good initiative to mature over time, so the voice of people could be listened to, as opposed to saying, stop that, it wasn't ours, do nothing, or let's start something else. We just seem to be going through this constant cycle of stop, start all the time.
Isn't it because it's because I don't know who started the constituency council, but it almost feels as if as long as it was done by them, we
don't want them to do with it. It's just ridiculous,
right? This is the thing, and I always go back to Sherbin and the backside. I always go back to that all the time because it's the simplest one, and it's one that everybody remember, and everybody remembers Serenade stealing there and all that kind of stuff when you pass by Sherbin and check the construction, too much stealing there. And it started by one administration, heralded all across the region. Administration change, you know what? We ain't finishing that. We ain't touching that.
And it was the right thing to do. Finish it.
It's the right thing to finish the thing. And that always happens. But it seems as if it was started by this group, we can't touch it. But there's also the thing to say, why is it that society always need to wait until a politician starts an initiative before they can come together and start it themselves as a community? And then that might ensure that it continues irrespective of who's there. So there's a little bit of ownership, I think, sometimes that needs to happen as well. And not necessarily...
But are we there yet, culturally?
No, but that's why we're having this conversation.
I want to say that that we do this already in Barbados. So one of the things so I wrote a book on civil society organizations and governance in the region. And one of the things that to me is an untold story about this region and Barbados as well is the extent to which we are okay because of our communities, because of groups in these communities. We were just talking about which organizations are providing sanitary products for girls. A lot of people do not know about this. The VAT has not come off, so we do what we have to do to make sure that people get what they need to get. In our communities, there are people that help other people to make sure that somebody has school clothes. If you didn't eat today, they do this. And we say that maybe our communities are not the same as they used to be, but I do think that across the Caribbean, people remain very generous. They do help each other. There are a lot of small groups that do not get national attention, that do a lot of work, and they may be quite apolitical. So they're not necessarily calling on the government to do this, do that, do the next. They themselves are filling the gaps that government should, in some cases, really be filling. And to pick up on Annalee's point, sometimes they reach the point where they notice that they cannot do any more because of policy. So we ourselves cannot do any more to create windows to the sea in Barbados unless the government steps in. We can go and we can clean up the beaches. We can go and make sure we try to protect sea turtles. We can go and do all kinds of things, but we cannot stop a building from going up and cutting off access to the sea. Absolutely. And these are the points at which you tend to hear groups coming forward that sometimes people had never heard about them. They didn't know that they had people in Barbados, that so many people that cared about this issue, that you could get 5,000 signatures, because we do things very quietly and we fill up these gaps. And if in this region we did not have civil society organizations and communities and so on, we would be in such an awful state because there's so much dysfunction in our politics.
Absolutely.
So much.
Yes. 100% agree with that. A question I want to make sure we don't lose it, because a question came up about LGBTQ policy, or whether or not it's making its way on any of the major platforms as well. Are we hearing enough about this? Because I know there have been some agitation over the years, but it never seems to be touched by any of the major parties in Barbados, actually.
Well, this one is an interesting one for me. Of course, if you're an individual who dedicates time to fighting inequality inequality is inequality. It can't be, oh, well, I can fight for this, but it's really not that. Um, Interestingly, I think that the issues of the LGBTIQ plus community have gotten more space in the agenda of the Barbados Labour Party
Do
government
you say
over
more
the
space
last
or
2
no
years.
space?
More,
More.
More. Okay.
more
Okay.
than the issue of women and girls. I think that there's a way in which there was an intentional interpretation of treating to gender issues as LGBTIQ plus issues to remove or to silence the issue of women and girls. And I'm not
Why?
saying that I'm not happy what the community has been able to achieve. But at the same time, if you're playing a numbers game, not but full stop, right? At the same time, if you're playing a numbers game, more women live in Barbados and are affected by policy decisions around gender than
And the
LGBTIQ
LGBT,
plus people.
right?
Right now, I think the reason why the LGBTIQ plus individuals were able to garner more space, though, is because it's a tourism issue. We all know that it's an economic issue.
Yeah.
And one of the examples that we have is that I think a part of why this election has been snapped is because we know that there was a promise by the government to recognize
Civil
same-sex
unions.
relationships at the civil level.
Mm-hmm.
But that kind of thing is not what the church will have in Barbados. That kind of thing is not what our traditional hypocritical, you know, um, you know,
Or
orientation
or
will
yes.
have.
Go ahead. Uh-huh.
And so you snap the election, you hope to win back, and then you do these things in a way that is no longer politically threatening. I think at least that's a part of
Or
where
you
the
got
snap
5 years
came
to
from.
absorb the hit.
But in the throne speech of the governor general, because we had two in the last throne speech of the governor general, now president, we had the issues of LGBTIQ plus featuring, and women and girls didn't even get a cursory mention. And so that is my view on it. But I turn it over to the other panelists.
I mean, I wonder if because there are some younger people that are quite vocal around these issues, it's been getting more airplay. But I thought that the way in which the Prime Minister addressed it as a civil issue, where I mean, we were hoping that last year those civil unions would have been, that legislation would have passed and civil unions would have been allowed. And she made it very clear that that was very different from having a marriage in a church, that that's something that might require a referendum or the church would have to decide. So I very much hope that that's something that that the government will make happen if it gets back into power. It's unfortunate, as you mentioned, though, that pressure is external and it's connected possibly to funding or to tourism, and that it's not something that we feel we deserve on our own without that kind of external pressure.
Interesting point.
Interesting point there.
Yeah.
I want to roll back to something that Marsha had said some time ago. This difference between women in power versus women in leadership. Sort of saying that women are in power, but they're not in leadership. I was wondering if you could explain that a bit, because as I listen to the conversation here, and I do quite a bit of work on diversity and inclusion within my workplace, and one of the things we've found is quite often the issue is around different types of leadership, not necessarily gender based, and also that people who are disempowered are disempowered, right? And that could be along any line. That could be along race, that could be along sexuality, that could be along gender. And what you find is that people who hold less power seem to have the same issues, right? Whether they're men, women, black, white, whatever, from a different socio-economic class, they tend to have similar issues than people who hold more power. So what's this distinction that you're making between women in power versus leadership, and which is a stronger situation for us as a region?
Well, I mean, I think in your segue to the question, I think you've hit all the nails on the head right there. Power is the basis of inequality. And so if you come into power, whether you're male, female, LGBTI, whatever, but you're not willing to step back and question the implication of your power, you stand the risk of creating inequality. And so I don't think when we conceptualize leadership in feminism or womanism, and I'm not feminist. People always ascribe that to me. I'm womanist. I'm not feminist, but whatever. But when we think about it, when we contemplate it in womanist theory and feminist theory, we are not asking for women to be put in higher positions so that they can perpetuate the power dynamics that create inequality and oppression, right? And I think that we don't yet have, some people say it's the stage before women in leadership is women in power. You have to get them there. You have to get them, in the parties, accepted by the parties. And then when it's safe enough or when there are enough women or whatever, you can go to the next level. I have my issues about that based on the historical reality of the women's movement in the Caribbean. But that is another discussion. But right now, we do not have women who are stepping out to really challenge the power dynamics and address the oppressions in our society. And that really exactly is the difference.
Right, but does it need to be women stepping out to challenge the power dynamics? That's kind of where
we were talking. We were talking specifically in the context of where you were looking at women being the two heads of the political parties now and leading us into this political fight and that kind of thing. And I was saying to you, what we have is women in power. We don't have women in leadership. So I'm not saying that women only have to do it. Absolutely not. It's, again, in equity and inclusion and diversity, we know that the people who are oppressed are not the people that we expect to liberate themselves without consideration from the individuals who are holding the unequal power. But at the same time, and this is why I was saying about the gains of Barbadian women having invested in their first female prime minister. At the same time, if you understand the unequal power relations, you understand your ability to be able to change the lives and experiences of women on the ground, but that is not done. The power dynamics and the oppression is not addressed. And to my mind, it doesn't make sense putting women in positions of power if that is going to be the result. I mean, men could as well do it. Like, it's not so different.
I want to disagree with you here, Marsha.
Yeah,
All
go
right.
ahead.
And the reason I want to disagree with you is because change takes time, okay? And it takes effort, and people need, there are different things that we need, okay? So was Barack Obama a game changer for race relations in the United States of America?
No.
He was and he was not. He was because it was really important for Black people and people of color to see this man become the president of the United States of America. We cannot underestimate how important that was. We cannot and should not underestimate how important Kamala Harris currently is for girls as well as those of color in the United States of America to see this. Are her policies progressive? A lot of them were far from. Barack Obama probably could have done a lot more, but this is really important. It is an important step to have.
Yeah.
So after his presidency, we still had Black Lives Matter. We still have all of these issues that trouble the United States of America and trouble us around the world. And so this is why I'm not as harsh of our leaders and our women who are leaders either, because I see this as a start. It is really important. I can speak for myself. I remember that I was a child when Mia Motley was the Minister of Education. And I looked up to Miss Motley because she was the Minister of Education. She was a woman. She seemed powerful, knowledgeable. And that was really important for me in actually thinking that an area like politics is an area that I could study, I could analyze, and I could do things in. So these are really important steps, even if they don't go as far as we would want them to go. But I think that we have to remember that it is a step and that we need to continue asking for more. So after we take this step, there are other things that we are requiring of you. And it is not just of women, because it cannot be women's responsibilities alone. It has to be of our society. And it also has a lot to do with the structure of our political system. Our political system is structured in a way that makes it hard to get some of these things through, and makes it difficult for us to have diverse candidates as well. So again, the supply of the people that we might want to have represent us is lacking, because there's so much that causes people to say, not me, I ain't going on a platform. For people to drag my name and the things that I did 20 years ago when I did not even know any better, for them to talk about my relationship with my husband or some boyfriend I had that wasn't a good, for them to talk about my sexuality. This may not be something for public consumption. So there are a lot of things we have to deal with, that looking at elections alone and looking at women alone and looking at men alone can't address, unless we look at how our system is structured. And when we go to, if we do have constitutional reform, these are some of the discussions we have to have about how are we structuring these things so that you cannot go on a platform and say certain things about people. So now we are making our libel and defamation laws address those things rather than addressing journalists that are really trying to interrogate serious issues in a country.
And I'm glad you've landed. I'm glad you've landed there, because I was going to move us down the depth of some of the things that are missing, Kristina. And for the life of me, I still can't understand why we don't have clarity on how Caribbean elections are funded, why we don't have anti-corruption legislation, why we still don't have fixed terms and stopping the snaps. When we talk about depth, those are some of the things that seem as though actually we should be here. Why aren't we?
I think it's because we
like
are.
It so.
Sorry.
You like it that way.
Comes back to power, because to do these things, you're removing power from yourself.
Removing power from yourself. I think too, it has a lot to do with our investment in a political system that brought us through our nationalist period, but that now will not take us further. So I'll give you an example of this strong man leader, which has now very much turned into the strong woman leader, right? Everything around the party focuses on that one individual. Everything goes through that. I think it was Errol Barrow that says all doors lead to the prime minister or something like that. And so there is a way in which we are stuck in a model that brought us through that period of time, and that was probably necessary and useful at that period of time, but it won't take us any further. And like many other things that require imagination in the Caribbean, we have not applied the imagination to say, okay, right, 2001, the goal is 2030 or 2040 or whatever. How can we reimagine and recreate to be able to get there in a way that is more sustainable, more sensible, different from the way that we have done it before?
Wow. Fabulous.
It's like, what does decolonized leadership look like, and how do you break away from being, you're cut on the cloth of your colonial history, and now at 55 years, what does decolonizing leadership and government and a small island developing state look like?
So I guess this conversation we should have, if we were to go back in time, we should have called this depth and breadth as well, because there's that wider issue that we should be looking at, of how do we create a vision that addresses things that are urgent, that we need to do now. But then there's the more strategic view as well of what are things that we need to address over the next 3 to 5, 7 years and beyond a political party visionary. And then finally there's the legacy vision of, when we leave here, what are the things that we want to leave behind as well? What is it that we want to have in place for the next generation to come and do even better than us? And if we don't start to have those conversations, not just politically and around election time, but within our society, we're not going to see progression.
And I should expect we should be doing that
global living room in 2050. Having the same conversation.
So let's Tricia.
Because I'm actually, Philip said some of what I was going to say just now about visionaries, because I believe the generation that is coming up now, I mean, I watch my children, and we've been forced into a technological age. And my daughter did a PowerPoint presentation for us on All Year's Night. And when she did, I said to myself, what was I doing when I was in class for? Definitely not this. Our children are so advanced educationally. And I'm not talking about mathematics and grammar that we're teaching in the classroom. I am saying these children have so much potential because of the knowledge in relation to information technology. We have young people who have traveled the world. And so they've seen things that many of the older persons in Barbados perhaps have not seen. So Andre made the point earlier that some of his family members, they will vote B or they will vote D because that's just who they know. This is my party, I'm going to vote for them regardless of whoever it is that is running. And that might be true for the older generation, but I don't believe it's going to continue in the generation that's coming up right now. I believe that the generation that is coming up right now are looking for options. They're looking for options. They're looking for change. They're looking for substance. The generation that's coming up right now does not want to sit down and listen on a political platform about you insulting somebody.
They ain't got time for that.
No, they don't have any time for that. They want real issues addressed. That's what they're listening for. And so a lot of persons, even right now, on the ground, you will hear people say, I don't know who to vote for. All the candidates look the same. Yeah. Because the independent ones, you're not going to vote for them. Even if they might look different, but they don't have any power to do anything when they get in. So nobody's voting for them. But we have a generation coming up now who wants to see something different in relation to politics. And they're expecting, because of their understanding globally, they're not confined now to what our grandparents knew only about sugarcane and slavery and that sort of stuff. They know a lot more. So you can't just bring to them corned beef and biscuits. Totally different game changer. Totally different.
No, I agree. I because even now, whenever I'm talking about demand more, I have a group of friends that are always telling me, man, you thinking about a utopia, but this is how it is now. And we got to just navigate. No, this is what it is. It's about potholes and buses and stuffed trucks and that kind of thing. That's what it is. And yes, I agree. But that's the basic level of what you expect you guys to do.
Ground floor, man. Ground floor.
This is not... This shouldn't be a huge manifesto strategic development issue. This is what you basically expect of them to do on the ground floor. And coming back to some of that, because we went through a lot of stuff there just now, which is really great. We touched on a lot of subjects. But the environmental one is one I also wanted to touch on already. Do people at home and in the Caribbean, guys in the Caribbean can tell me as well. I know we got people in Trinidad and St. Vincent and St. Lucia watching also. Do people really understand the climate change conversation and can draw a line between access to the sea in that conversation, development of tourism infrastructure on the beach fronts in that conversation? And do they understand to agitate to stop this? Because this is never a thing that comes up really and truly. Drawing the line between, hey, great speech in Scotland, but then you're coming back and you're allowing a whole bunch of hotels to go out on my beach, which is my first line of defense. If the sea level really rise and these companies can just take it stock, disappear and leave me with a plant like Samla's Castle or somewhere about that just there running to rust. Do people understand this conversation? Annalee, I know this is probably something that you get involved in quite a lot. Are we as Bajans understanding the conversation really though?
I mean, I think, I think that there are a lot of people are struggling and they're finding it difficult to get energy maybe around some of these issues because they're trying to pay their bills. But I have been to a number of town hall meetings. There was one at Accra Beach Hotel a couple of years ago I thought that was particularly inspiring. Hundreds of people came out. Gabby was there. This was, trying to talk about the construction of a restaurant opposite Blue Horizon, which then led to this 250-page document that was signed by thousands of people. And people were very articulate. But when you realize that the environmental impact assessments, which are required by the state, are paid for by the developer. So when I went to the Hyatt Ziva town hall meeting, which was early in January, its location had changed a couple of hours before the meeting started. It was at the time of year when people are still in holiday mode. There wasn't a huge group of people that came out. somebody from the National Trust questioned, can we maintain our UNESCO World Heritage Site when you have just demolished a building where the Hyatt Ziva is going up? And does that affect? Do we care? You know, that you just, you know, you've just bulldozed this building. And then they hired a community activist from within that area where the Hyatt Ziva is going up. And this guy, he's got up and he said he was paid by the developers to be a community activist, and everybody in the community had light in their eyes when they saw the development of this construction. And the architects were, I don't know if they were Colombian, they were from a South American country. Now, this is an 18-story in part construction with 4 floating cabanas. And they said that we as Barbadians would be welcome to run on the beach between these cabanas and the 18-story. And I was so angry about that because, you know, there's a history of colonization and race relations in this country where Black Barbadians were denied access to many spaces. And to expect that we would be interested on this beach, which is a pressure relief valve, I think, for many working class Barbadians. And you could see that it functioned as that under COVID. And to tell us that we had permission to run on that strip of land between 4 floating cabanas in a turtle nesting area where the flora and fauna of that environment was going to change in an all-inclusive hotel. And the fact is that town hall meeting was a box to be ticked, and it is not designed for anything to change. It doesn't matter what anybody got. And to go to that town hall meeting where these 14 people are on a platform, the average person does not feel comfortable getting up to go to that microphone to articulate their concerns, or maybe they don't know how to articulate their concerns, but they tick that box. Many good questions were asked. What about sewage? It's going into the Bridgetown sewage plant. What about water? We're one of the most water resource strained countries in the world. They're not putting in a desalination plant. What about the fact that you've changed this to an all-inclusive? None of it mattered. And if that EIA is funded by the developer, you can bet your bottom dollar that it is going to come out all. They said it would have 0 impact on traffic.
Cigarette industry, right? Cigarettes don't do anything.
But I don't. But you see, I don't necessarily think that is fair, because ultimately we have the same thing in the UK. But it is for us to get the right people to challenge the AIA.
But
because
I wanted to say something on this too. I went to that meeting as well. And that meeting was something else. Because as you said, there were some very good questions asked. I thought that the people who were on the platform were quite well prepared for the questions. They talked about having like a little market at the side where vendors could sell some things and they can have a green space. So, you know, like just throw some crumbs at the natives so they can have some things. But you know what I think about these beachfront properties is that when you talk about vision, this is very short-sighted. Because if we look at other kinds of projections about climate change and about sea level rise, you are building a hotel that is going to be partially underwater. And this is not just, what I want to say is that this is not just a problem for this hotel or for these hotels, you know. This will become a problem for all of us. Because,
that's
of insurance costs. So, and if you have a hurricane, if you have some serious storm surge or whatever, and these places are damaged, insurance does not occur just in you know, a little vacuum. This is going to cause, and we see this whenever we have natural disasters across the region, that the insurance costs, when they have to pay out, it's going to affect the insurance costs of all of us. And we talk about cost of living. We have to have insurance. You cannot have insurance if you have a house, if you have a car, all kinds of things. So I really think that this is so silly for our government to continue to allow people to build on the shorefront. You have to have a distance away from the beachfront where you need to build considering climate change. You can have access to the beach, but you cannot build on the beach. You can't. When we're dealing with climate change, it's just ridiculous.
I want to add.
I think in Antigua, they're not allowed to. The last time I went to Antigua, all of the hotels and everything were on the other side of the road.
Countries have this legislation, have had this kind of legislation for over 2 decades, where they have stopped allowing people to build on the beach because of sea level rise, storms, the damage that you do to the marine ecosystem. And we are continuing to do this, and then we go and talk about climate change. Like, I don't know how we can keep doing it.
Yeah, hypocrisy.
I wanted to share.
Christina had the fancy name for it. It's what? Where you have the
Janus
two faces. Sorry, Annalee. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I've been thinking a lot about the term overseer versus inner seeing, and it's something that I'm doing in my own work as an artist, where I'm trying to figure out, how do we form an intimate relationship with a landscape that has been so heavily mediated by centuries of the plantation economy that has now shifted to tourism? And I think about the overseer as the person who, in our history, supposedly had an objective perspective on what he looked at. And through that kind of distance relationship to the landscape, had the capacity to engage in extractivist models and practices. And what I'm trying to do in my own work is to think about the word inner seeing, and that if we can develop another kind of relationship to the land, that we nurture a more intimate relationship with the land. And for me, I talk about this through the act of walking in a kind of a meaningful kind of way, as a way to understand the land outside of these extractivist models. That if we have a more personal relationship with the landscape, that you don't want to engage in these extractivist policies, because you begin to care for a place outside of just seeing its economic return and understanding that it has intrinsic value. And so this is the thing about the plantation, that our way of thinking, every gesture needs to be economically viable. Every action, down to love, is a transactional engagement, right? So how do we move beyond that and begin to have discussions outside of our very traumatic history around loving a place, nurturing a place, taking care of a place and of each other? Because all people are seeing is the economic benefits, and they're not looking at the outrageous damage that's happening to this place.
Yeah, I really like that term, inner seer, because it's not just the relationship with the land; it's also a relationship with each other and with yourself.
I think too. It ties back into the point about having a different type of leadership. I thought for sure that COVID-19 had taken care of the mess that is supposed to go in front of the Methodist Church. Tourism the world over is never going back to what it used to be. Planes are not going to be able to fly at full capacity for at least the next, I would say, 3 to 5 years, given what is happening with COVID and what is happening, with restrictions and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Hotels, cruise ships, none of them is going back to the type of capacity. So we now have plants across Barbados that are fighting to fill themselves up in a way that is economically viable. What on earth do we need another one of those 18 stories high in the context of COVID?
I think that's one of a few, actually.
But we are so locked into that model of the only way we can make money is tourism.
Yes.
That we don't want to sit back and think of who we are as a people, what we have, as Annalee said, and what we can do that the world wants more of. And it doesn't get better because of the insecurities that we still have about ourselves. And in my case, I'm talking about as a Black individual, right? So there are products that the world is looking to us for. In Canada, one of the things that I've been surprised about on my return is just how Caribbean culture is taking over the imagination of young Canadian people. They want to dress like us. They want to song like us. They want to eat like us. And back home, we have not captured ways of turning that into an industry. As individuals start to become healthier in Barbados, they want natural soaps. They want natural foods. And there is a way that individuals are filling up that market space by producing those things. But we haven't started to think about how we can turn that into effective industry through marketing and through, policy that enables. We need vision. We need.
I'm wondering just thinking of alternative leadership sometimes isn't just looking immediately at how do we turn it into industry, but how do we turn it into a way of living? How do we turn, using those natural products into, this is our way of being us. And I think that's the sort of, we do need that in addition to looking at economic viability and industry. But really we need to see leadership that starts to look at community and society and us making do, to use that term, with what we have and how we live as well.
One of the upsides to the COVID and the reduction of importing foreign food is that I started to learn about how many small farmers there were. So I now there's a St. Lucian woman there to me who has a 2-acre plot of land, and she grows all of this amazing organic produce. And my goal is to try and put more money into the hand of the small farmer rather than the large supermarket chain. And I think that, we need to think more about food sovereignty and feeding ourselves and eating better. And, the issue of illnesses that are coming about because of poor eating practices, and revering the foods that we have and learning more about them, and supporting that economy.
Yeah.
No, I agree. And even with food security, seems to be every now and then at election time, another buzz phrase that comes up, but then another 5-year cycle goes on and nothing happens, but it gets put into a manifesto again. Regarding it just seemed, and I saw the president of Guyana actually lamenting that, and he seems to find a bit of a voice, although he's another one that speaks about climate change, but then still finding oil and ready to drill all across Guyana at the moment as well. But we see that. I really like the way how we had the conversation today. I think we touched on a number of different things, and the whole conversation around how do we demand more, how do we press, how do we force our politicians to elevate the level of the conversation and not to accept, as Tricia was saying, the corned beef and biscuit model anymore, which is right across the region, and it's true. We talk about demanding, and then we accept the whole corned beef and biscuit model sometimes. So I think,
well, there's some people who are vegan as well. So,
well, even vegan people call it corned beef. They just call it vegan corned beef. So it's still corned beef. So it's about how do we not accept that. And I know we've been going on for 2 hours here, and someone was saying we need some other sessions on a whole bunch of other things. We can break this down and have more conversations. But it's been fantastic conversation. But Tricia, a couple of weeks till election, as we bring it home, what are you demanding? What do you want to see more of, and what's gonna be? What are you looking for as you look at this whole discourse within the political landscape, and even in the future? You've got 2 young children.
In the immediate, I really would like to hear what's going on with education. As I said, I have not read the manifesto that's been brought out as yet, so I don't know what's in it. But of course, we see manifestos come out all the time, and unfortunately, there's no guarantee that because it's in a manifesto, it's going to happen. But I really would like some immediate guidance. I keep hearing about a roadmap. I haven't actually seen it as yet from the Ministry of Education. As to what is going on with education, school, and our children. In the long term, I would like to see politicians who are not so concerned with keeping the working class busy working that they don't have time to capitalize on the ideas that they have. Because I believe a lot of people in our country have some fantastic ideas. But a lot of people are so poor that they don't have time to deal with those ideas because they have to go to work. That I don't know if that sounds strange, but
no, I get it.
That has been on my mind recently. That I hear a lot of people with great ideas. They say, why don't you do that? No, I gotta go to work. Just the basic thing of paying bills consumes all of people's time, and they just don't have time for other things that could be beneficial, not just to them, but to our country as a whole.
Wow.
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, we can explore that. That's another.
That's a really good.
But I like that. I like that very, very much so. Marsha?
Well, I want one of the takeaways of this discussion to be that when you talk about women's issues, you really talk about human issues. You talk about all of the gamut of things that we have covered today. You're talking about the way that women are different, but you're also talking about the way that women need the same things that any human being needs to be able to live, and not only live, but thrive, as Tricia said, in any society that they call home. I feel like I done with politicians. Like I just I am I I have spent a lot of time in my younger life looking for space for the advocacy that I do for women and girls on either side of the political aisle. And I haven't found it on either side of the political aisle. So, like, as well, I think that I can just resolve that union work and activism are as much work as politics themselves and stay in my lane.
Wow.
I think it is important for young girls to see the image of women at all spheres of society. So Christina talked about how, seeing Mia as a woman in politics, as an education minister, it was a positive experience for her as a young girl. But I want us in Barbados to move beyond that and to have different models of different types of ways that we can be successful. Wow. Everybody cannot become a politician in Barbados, and there are ways in which when some people do become politicians, the great work that they have done in other spheres is lost.
Yeah.
Right? So we have to pull back from the politics of inclusion. I don't know that I have an overarching message. I'm grateful for the conversation. It's left me with a lot to reflect on. And so as we go through the next couple of days of this campaign, I will continue to reflect and just hope and pray for the sake of my small island that we very quickly stop talking about these things and realize that we need a roadmap to doing.
Yeah.
Good job.
Wow.
Amazing. Well said. Well said. Annalee? Christina, I'm going to leave you for last because I got such a broad questions to ask you to.
The Caribbean, I think, is a place that can drive you mad. I am turning 59 this year. I feel I've been working as an artist in a country without a national art gallery or a contemporary museum is a recipe for sending you insane when that is the tool of your trade. I show in many places and I can't show my work here, and my work is about this place, and I love this place, and it breaks my heart when I feel that we can do better in the arts. So it's not in the manifesto. I don't know if I'll ever live to see a national art gallery or a contemporary art museum. That's what I want. I would like the transparency legislation. I think that that's something that this current government, their last platform advocated for that. I would like to see civil unions for people in the LGBTQ community. And I would like to see that we take care of our coastlines, and we're not seeing everything as transactional, that we can only look at the coast as a way to generate income rather than feed our own souls and spirits. And I think probably in some ways, like Marsha, I work here and around the region, and I feel at this age now I'm kind of retreating into my studio because there's some days where I lose hope, and I feel that all I can offer now is my work as an artist, and my role as an artist is to reflect back this place and to offer that work as a way to think critically about where we're at and who we are, and to envision other ways of being and loving. That's all I can say at the moment. But it's such an honor to be with all of you today. I'm so inspired. There's leadership here in these women, right? There's leadership here. So thank you.
Very true.
Thank you so much.
Christina, I feel like I could have a 10-point question to ask you to bring with your experience and with your expertise. But same question to you, I guess. How can we demand more during this season from our politicians? I know it's hard, and one might say we're too late. No, you're already in the manifestos out. But how can we continue to demand more even in this season? And how should we view, what lens should we be looking through as we look at these platforms?
That's a difficult question because we are already in the heat of the hustings. People are on their political platforms. And if I am being honest, I think that the two established political parties are speaking to their bases. They are not speaking to the general population. And this is what political parties do. I would say the Democratic Labour Party in particular needs to get their base out, expand their base, and that is what they're doing. So we can ask for the things that we want, but right now we are in competition mode. And I think it is better when we are not in this mode, perhaps, to start making our demands on both the government and the other parties that are seeking to take the government at some point in the future. And there are just so many things. I know, Andre, you said that you want us to move away from looking at the potholes and the buses and the basics.
Move away from only looking at those things. Those things seem to dominate the whole cycle. I know they're real things to people, don't get me wrong. But it seems to be like, that's what we're here for, put us in and this is what we'll do, rather than the longer conversation.
I agree with you, but the thing about it is that the reason we have to keep coming back to potholes and buses and so on is that we don't have the long-term plan and the vision. Because if you had a long-term plan, your roads would not be getting in potholes all the time. And you would not be at the point where you have all of these broken down buses. So when we're talking about politics, there's politics with the big P, which is the elective politics and what the ministers and the MPs and so on are doing that people get really obsessed with. But then there's the small p politics. It is the things that we do on a daily basis when we say it is not acceptable for us that you do not have a road maintenance schedule and a plan. It is not acceptable to us that you don't have a schedule and a plan for maintaining parks in Barbados, that you don't have a plan, a proper plan that we can see and we can refer to with respect to the arts. We need to be able to see these things to hold our leaders to account. And this is the small p politics. And in every country, it is the minority of people that will do this. The majority are doing, the things that they have to do. But this minority makes a difference. You cannot have them, though, if you are not giving us the information. So we need to have not just promises, we need to have the plan that you are going to implement so that we can hold you to account. When you say that the parks are going to be maintained on a monthly schedule, and we see that nobody is coming in to clean up the park, and the park is now becoming a bedroom for people who are homeless, right? We need to know that you have a plan to deal with people who are homeless as well, so that they are not living in situations that are undignified. So we need to look at the small and the big P, not just the elections and what the ministers and so on are doing, but the ways in which our country is being managed. And some of us have to hold our leaders, the civil service, and everyone to account when we don't have the basics. Because if we don't have the basics, we can't get in the metaverse. We can't stop the sea level from rising. We can't do all of these things appropriately if we don't just have the simplest of things in our country. I hope that's a good enough answer.
Yeah, that's a fantastic answer.
It is.
So, and then also one for you again, Christina. What do you expect to wake up on the 20th and see?
I expect to
political
see
landscape.
The Barbados Labour Party will be back in power. I think that they will lose some seats. I don't know how many they will lose. It's really difficult to predict because the last election was so anomalous. Yeah. But I suspect that they will lose a couple of seats at minimum. If the DLP does not manage their affairs properly, they may find themselves in the same situation again. So it is up to the Democratic Labour Party to do what they need to do to win back some of those seats. But this is an opportunity for them that if they don't take advantage of it, it will be their fault.
It is true.
No, I agree 100%. Mark, you want to wrap up?
No, well, look, it was just, I've thoroughly enjoyed the education that you ladies have brought to the living room this evening. You've traveled across a lot of ground, touching on so many important factors that are essential to how we move forward as a people, not just in Barbados, but also as a Caribbean region. So thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk to us and have a conversation, and don't be a stranger. You're always welcome back into the living room at any time. because it's been a fabulous, fabulous conversation this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
No
Nice to
problem
meet
at all.
everybody.
Yeah,
Guys,
it's nice
guys
to
in
meet
the-
you all.
Guys in the chat, just let our guests know how much you enjoyed the conversation and just thank them for their time as well for being here. I thought it was fantastic. So many people in the chat was picking different pieces to say, but we can delve into that even more. You can have another show on just climate change, on the LGBTQ issues and feminist issues or women issues as well. So there's lots, which says, I think right across the region, people want more from our politicians. And I think from the chat and even from this conversation as well, it's clear that that's the case, that we want more. It may be that people just don't know how to demand more. And then once elections come about, we devolve into the whole tribalist, I can wear my red or yellow. In the case of Barbados, I think there's a green now as well. We can wear our t-shirts and that's the way how it's going to be. And we going down the road and forget what they say. Whatever they say is good with me because this is my people. And we need to elevate. But I think as Tricia said, the generation coming after, that's going to be a thing of the past.
Yeah.
You know. So guys, thank you so much for being part of the living room today. It's been a pleasure having you.
Absolutely.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good convo, Phil.
Yeah, no, it was good. We touched on a lot of various areas, but what I really enjoyed was looking at a different sort of leadership. I like that the conversation went there. I think that's the main emphasis, and not just a different type of politics, but a different type of leadership. Because there's a difference between those two.
Yeah,
No, I think so. Mark?
Yeah, I think there's so much to reflect on, and the two immediate things for me, and it's really important that people like Marsha and Kristina and Annalee are around politics, but there's a feeling that they don't want to be, and I get a feeling that there are people in the region generally who have a voice, whose voice can be influential, but they don't really want to be participating in that because they're so disaffected by what they've seen over the years. And I think that that's a sad place for us to arrive at. And I think the other thing that I reflect on with the point that Annalee was making about the environment, and I think we got to be careful in Barbados in particular not to be so obsessed about the South Coast and West Coast in terms of beach access. It's important. But I also feel the East Coast and protecting of the coastline and people being able to see the sea is really important for their well-being also. And it doesn't very often seem to feature in the conversation because we're always talking about hotels on the other side of the island.
It features in the conversation if we're trying to bring a foreign investor to create a wellness opportunity on the beach. But not for us.
But we have to determine how we want this land to contribute to our well-being and our health. And it feels as though there's a bigger conversation beyond access to the beach, although that is critical to us. We got to make sure we don't lose sight of what is not being spoken about and it doesn't get taken away from us because the other side is critical as well.
I agree. Go, Phil.
No, just saying the question you had asked, Andre, about climate change and so on, as if people on the island understanding the conversation. I think there's a different way of having that, putting that question is the conversation being had with people in ways that people will really engage in it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not being sort of condescending to people's level of understanding or education or anything. It's just being real about what is it that people would immediately engage in and get and understand and make a connection to when you're talking about climate change. I remember chatting with Kwame, who was on some time ago. One of the things he said is he's looking to invest in land in the north of Canada because he's not sure that in 20 years that the Caribbean is even going to be around. Right? And when you start to have that conversation in that way, that you recognize, yes, it is about access to the beaches. Yes, it is about well-being and so on. But when you actually think it's about existence, right? That then starts to change the way you engage in that conversation as well.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you there. It just feels. I agree with you as where you say is the conversation being had, and when I ask if we understand, it is that because I do think in some cases it is being had, by different groups of people. And I think it was Kristina who made a point about the different community groups who do a lot of things, including getting people going to the beach and walk on morning. I think Annalee was saying that there's so many people when she's going walking, how many people she sees walking on the beach or walking and enjoying the spaces, is whether or not we're making the connection that this is actually part of our well-being. This is things that we could lose.
Yeah.
And that if we do lose it, what the impact would be on society and all these kind of things is and that's where I feel sometimes that's where the conversation falls down.
Yeah.
And that's where the noise of pothole buses and stuff trucks then takes over. Unfortunately, and that's where people then devolve into that.
Yeah, because those are the things that immediately affect people.
Yeah, agreed.
You know? Even if you're not driving a car, you're walking on the road and you fall in a pothole.
Well, this is true. I know. I just get so frustrated by those things sometimes not coming through, or by us not demanding more of our politicians. I mean, I listen to Mark and I were talking maybe not pretty late watching some of these stuff on television or on social media, and it's like, oh my God, I waited so late to hear this nonsense. Again, and that's how I feel, and I get the feeling. I agree with Tricia, because I get the feeling when I see the comments and see the age group of the people then using social media and making the comments. They don't want to hear some of this nonsense sometimes.
Not interested in it.
They're like, what?
And
what nonsense you telling me? Tell me something different.
There has to be an expectation that these politicians are going to have to work harder. Harder, man. Work harder. They might not like it, but they got to work harder. Sorry, they're not working hard enough. Yes,
I think
absolutely.
it was Annalee that was saying, and deliver. Don't go and talk out there and then don't deliver. For me as well. Deliver. So, yeah, I think that's a great conversation. I know people from Trinidad and different places were making comments as well and making comparisons as to whether or not the same thing is happening in their countries as well. So that's good. And I think this is a conversation that we're probably going to come back to at some point, maybe in one of the other election seasons across the region as well, about what are we demanding, and let's see what we're understanding that's happening on the ground as well. So we can definitely come back to that conversation in these conversations. Hey guys, thank you so much for staying with us. 2 hours or more actually. Sometimes it's good to have a long form conversations on these things. Sometimes 30 minutes with 15 minutes being ads isn't always good to get some of these points across. Sometimes the long form conversation on social media is better sometimes. I ain't hitting at nobody, I just say. Sometimes the long form conversation is good, and the interaction with the audience. We always say that you guys are also our guests as well. No matter how many guests we have, the audience are also part of that. So I just want to say thank you guys for sticking with us for the past couple of hours. Do us a favor and hit share. You guys had the benefit of the live conversation, but let's bring some others into the conversation as well who might watch it on the watch back as well. So do us a favor, hit share, tag a few friends so that they can all be part of the conversation also. It's been great. We can probably stick with Barbados elections for a while, but we can always try to elevate the conversation into a Caribbean conversation. So our usual audience around the region, bear with these three Barbadian fellas for a little bit. The Barbadian elections happening. We can stick with it. So, no apologies. Thank you for that, Jennifer. Okay. Well, I know she means time or the Barbadian aspect of it, but we can stay with it for a little while, and we can be also live on the 19th as well. So thank you guys for being with us. It's been a pleasure. Until next time.
That was good.
Good conversation. Really enjoyed it.